welcome back to Table Talk, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again for joining us. As always, Jeremy is alongside with me. Jesse is out this week, although he will be back for the next episode. We look forward to having him back. And tonight we have a very special guest. Joining us is Val Gumshoguy himself. He is a data miner on all things Bigfoot. Currently the operator of Michigan Bigfoot Report and Data. Gumshoguy's Corner. Val, how are you?
Pretty good. How you doing, Jake and Jeremy?
Doing good, thank you.
Pretty good.
Sorry, Jake. We'll get your name straight. Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me here. And I'm pretty much good to go with whatever you guys want to discuss.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time. I know me and you have talked back and forth for the last couple weeks, and I know you have a lot going on, so I appreciate you taking some time to talk to us. I guess I'll start first off. I found out about you and your group obviously through Facebook, and I'm a member of a couple different Bigfoot, Sasquatch related groups. When did you first become interested in the subject?
Well, I like to say that I became interested in the topic of Bigfoot as a tragic happenstance. I spent 25 and a half years in law enforcement, and roughly all of my adult life I've spent in law enforcement. And so I'll just say this. I've got 2 tours, military tours behind me. I possess 2 honorable discharges. I graduated from Central Michigan with a degree in community development. And I've been involved in a lot of stuff. I worked, I was assigned to state police for a while, and then I was assigned to a federal agency as a task force agent. I did some instructional teaching at 2 of Michigan's largest community colleges when I was off the books, off the time clock. And none of this pertained to Bigfoot. As a matter of fact, it never really entered my mind. And I was also featured on a cable channel as a subject matter expert for what I did. I was a guest speaker, an invited guest speaker, twice in Illinois for a large Midwest criminal investigation seminar or conference. And beyond that, I wrote a published article with a huge law enforcement publication that went up and down the East Coast. And I was associated with a large international group of investigators of the criminal type, and so that's what I did when I was off duty and off the clock. I was a licensed investigator, private investigator with the state of Michigan, and so 25 and a half years of doing this stuff, I've seen a lot of things that you can't unsee and unexperience. And so nearing the point where I felt I was going to retire, my partner was Ojibwa Indian. We've been partners for quite a few years. And so I worked midnights for approximately 15 years. It's a long time, 12-hour shifts.
Yeah.
And so my daytime hour to me was 3 o'clock in the morning. And so one day I went to my partner and I told him, I says, listen, something's happening with me. There's something happening with me and I don't understand what's going on. I says, it feels to me like it's a life-changing event coming up, and I don't understand what it is. But I says, I'll tell you what. I says, I woke up one night, and I told my partner this. I says, I woke up one night, and I says, I opened my eyes, and I says, I see an Indian man, an apparition, an Indian, a man dressed in full old Indian regalia. And I says, this man is staring at me and I'm staring at him. And I says, I don't know what to make of this. I says, as far as I says, I felt as though this fool had broken into my house. And I says, I'm trying to get out of bed to get my gun because, I don't know what's going on here. But I says, hear me out, Terry. I says, a few days earlier, I says I was sleeping in one of the few instances where I had some sound sleep. And I says, I woke up to my name being called. And I says, it was just as clear and crisp as somebody standing over me calling my name. And I says, these things are happening. And I says, I don't understand what's going on. I says, give me some feedback. Terry, like men, you go to your friends and you speak your heart. And that's what I did. And over the years, he's kept me safe. He's watched over me, and I've done the same to him throughout the career. And he gave me some feedback. He's Native American, and he's very spiritual about life. And he gave me some feedback. However, I started talking to him, and one day I had a notion, 3 o'clock in the morning, I had a notion to call an 80-year-old woman in Ohio. Her son had gone missing 30 years previous down there in Louisiana. And so I called this woman at 3 o'clock in the morning, and she knew who I was. And I asked her, I says, can you recount everything that you know about your son, about him going missing? Tell me about his last phone call to you. And she did. She cried and she wept. I listened. And when she composed herself, I told her, I says, listen, I says, this is what I'm going to do for you. And I said, I'm going to look for your son and I'm going to bring him home for you. And she thanked me over and over again. And that's where we left it. I hung up the phone and I started to think about that whole entire conversation, how I called her. I initiated this and I called her. And then I started to think about it. And I was thinking, how am I going to do this? And so I let it go. About a week later, maybe 2 weeks later, one of the few times that I've ever worked day shift. I mean, I worked midnights for 15 years. It's a long time. One of the few times that I've ever worked day shift, I had some friends call me and ask me to swing by their house, that some woman wanted to meet me. Well, when you work in law enforcement and you hear some woman wants to meet you, your antenna should go up immediately, the red flags, because you don't know what you're going to be accused of. You don't know what's waiting for you on the other end. So you kind of go into this a little gingerly, I should add. And so I made it over there, and I met my friends, and they introduced me to this middle-aged woman that I had never seen before in my life. Never. I've seen her a few times since this incident that I'm going to tell you about. This all leads back to our topic, Bigfoot, and I'll show you how it does. But she looked at me, and she was quite poignant, and she asked me questions. She says, "I'm going to ask you a couple questions," and she says, "Don't give me a long report. Just give me a yes or no." And she says, she looks at me. She says, "You're an old soul. You've been here before many times." And she says, she says, "You want me to tell you how you died in your previous life?" And I said, "No, not really. I'm not interested in that." She says, "Do you get headaches a lot?" I said, "Not necessarily." I said, "The occasional seasonal sinus and stuff," but I says, "Not necessarily." Okay. She says, I'm gonna say something to you, and she says, "Just take it for what it's worth." She says, "Do you work alone a lot?" And I says, "Yes." She says, "I see a red car," and she says, "I see round red tail lights. I hear gunshots. Be careful." This is her warning to me. And I mean, I just met this woman. I don't know who she is, but she's quite bold with her with, with her comments and remarks to me and stuff. She says, I see a regal woman that stays with you all the time. She's around you all the time. She's looking out for you." Stately, very stately woman. She knows you. She looks at me sideways, uh, Jake and Jeremy. She looks at me sideways with that sideways glance, and she says, "You're looking for somebody." I said, "Yes." And again, with that sideways glance that I've seen before, she says, "I don't see them on this plane. They'll let you know when they're ready to be found, though." And I'm going to tell you something, guys. This floored me when I heard this. There's no way possible that this woman could have ever known this, ever. I mean, I'm not a poker player. I'm a chess player. I don't show my hand when I'm playing, but I've never discussed that with anybody. There's no way she ever would have known this. And so I'm on the track to looking for this person unofficially. It's not an official investigation. It's me taking my time, free gratis, paying it forward, doing something that I feel that I have to do before this life-changing event that's going to take place in my life. And for 21 months, I went down to Ohio and took a statement from her. I took a specimen sample from her and her daughter, because right now I'm looking for this missing person, and I have no way of knowing where this person is. I have an idea where he went missing, but that doesn't tell me anything. All I know is this young man left Daytona Beach, Florida, hitchhiking in the deep South in the 1980s and disappeared from a truck stop. And so it is that I contacted a investigator out of Louisiana from that parish. Down there they have parishes. Up here we have counties. And come to find out, there was never ever a missing persons report made on this young man. The sheriff 30 years ago had lied to this woman, this old woman who grieved all these years thinking that law enforcement was on the hunt for her missing son. And someday she was going to be notified one way or the other, an outcome from for her son. And what I found in my investigation was that the sheriff lied to her and didn't even make a missing persons report. The person just disappeared off the face of the earth. And so this is where I come in. I made contact with an old retired crime reporter down in Houston, Texas. And some of the things that she told me was pretty shocking for that time, for that era down there in the deep South. And so I made contact with the investigator in Louisiana and found out who their forensic scientists were, contacted them personally, identified myself, and made it explicitly clear that this was an unofficial investigation and that I was doing this free gratis. In other words, I wasn't being paid for this. This is out of the kindness of my heart that I was doing this. Understanding that, the scientists did the same, surprisingly. They offered to do the DNA testing and send me the DNA kits to my door. They said, tomorrow morning you'll have those kits delivered to you by UPS. Be waiting for them. I got them. I went down to Ohio, took the specimen samples, packed them up, sent them off, followed it up. And probably, I don't know, a week later, maybe 2 weeks later, I don't know, I got notified that the samples were good and they got some good mapping from the DNA samples, which told me that they now know that when they come across this individual, this missing person, they can match that with a name. This is 1980. DNA didn't come to the United States until 1990s at least. Think about that. So from my previous experience being in the field, I'm familiar with some of the cursory operations that go on with the medical examiners. And I do know for a fact that anybody that comes into a medical examiner's office as a dead body, the medical examiners take a tissue sample from these people, and they pack it away like a librarian does in the archives, and they put it away. And that's, for me, being familiar with the business, that is so great, because how are you gonna match that up with somebody? How are you gonna find somebody 30 years or 40 years or 50 years ago without that tissue sample? And that's the way it's done. So anyways, 21 months later, I get a call to contact this medical examiner down in Houston, Texas. I contacted her and she says, "Is this Val Gumshoguy?" I said, "Yes." "Is this Sergeant Gumshoguy?" "Yes." She says, "I got some good news and bad news." I says, "Well, I suck at horseshoes and I can't play poker." I says, "Give me the bad news first." She said, "Homicide." And I said, "What's the good news?" She says, "I know where he's at." I said, "Where's he at?" She says, "Right here. We've had him for 15 years as a John Doe with no ID. But you see, that DNA gave him a name, gave him identity." And she says, "Are you the person of contact?" I said, "Yes." She says, "Are you going to contact the family members?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "Okay." So I said, "Can I get the names of the homicide detectives assigned to this case?" And I got it, called them, talked to them. So from that point on, guys, it took another 4 months to clear the state and federal permits and bureaucracy. You need permits and passes to carry human remains across interstate lines and stuff. So once that was done, we returned the remains back to the native home of Ohio, and the family asked me to eulogize their son, their family member, and I did. He was buried, and the next work day, next Monday that I went into work, I had lunch and supper with my friends, went back to the precinct, the station house, opened up my locker, put my equipment away, and told the commander there, I says, I'm going home. He says, well, what are you taking, a vacation day or sick day? And I said, no. I says, I'm retired. I'm done. And so, as custom in that business, I unload my gun, hand it over to him, hand my badge over to him. He comes out, shakes my hand, hands the gun back to me. This is your thanks for 25 and a half years, your badge, a handshake, and you get the radio salute to the regional cars and stuff. And so that ends my career. So now I'm on the outside looking in. And that's the way I walked away. But with all the things that I seen and read while searching for this missing person, I found something interesting, and that was, well, number one, the Interstate 10 is unique in the United States because it runs east-west. It runs from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean, and I was never aware of this. But all along the way, while I was looking for this young man, I noticed hundreds, thousands, if not thousands of missing persons all along the interstate, all through these states, from east to west. And about that same time, I remember listening to David Paulides on the radio on the missing 411 cases and stuff. And so all this stuff started to resonate with me. And I'm not here to tell you or anybody else or any of your listeners that all these missing people had to do with Bigfoots. It's not the case. And I'm saying this from a police perspective. But as a Bigfoot enthusiast, I don't discount that anybody hasn't been injured or killed by these animals either. I don't believe that. But neither do I believe that all of these people are missing and gone because of Bigfoots. There's other reasons why they go missing. Some of them are from foul play. Some of them are from human trafficking. Some of them are other crimes. Some of them are natural. Some of them are volunteer missing. And other predator animals out in the wild. There's all kinds of reasons for things the way they are. And so I went back and I made contacts with a professional archivist. And I had this person pull up all these articles. I assume that both of you guys are from Michigan, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. So down in Monroe County, Southeast Michigan, 1965, they had a Bigfoot incident down there, one of the earliest ones that I can remember, and they referred to that as the Monroe Monster. And I had that archivist pull up all these news articles, and I'm flipping through all these news articles, reading them very carefully. And what I found in these articles is pretty amazing. And in some of the things that I've read, I came to the conclusion that there was a lot of chicanery, a lot of buffoonery going on. And number one, in one instance, you had law enforcement down there that openly admitted that they tried to keep the Bigfoot sighting down there that allegedly attacked some young girl. they attempted to keep that secret, and they couldn't. And so when the news got out, the news spread, and you had a circus event. You had people from Ohio and Detroit and all points of the compass coming into Monroe County looking for this Bigfoot. And so there it is from there. And I contacted Bob Daigle, who is a well-known Michigan Bigfoot researcher. I would say that I would even say that Bob is a icon in the Bigfoot community for Michigan. I went out with Bob. We talked. I went out with him. I went to some of his seminars, his conferences. We spent a lot of time together. I learned a lot from Bob. And so while I was doing this in 2012, I was busy setting up databases. And I created 4 databases, one for Michigan, one for US, North America, and one for reference, like an encyclopedia, and another that I just tagged a temporary database. And what that temporary database is an accumulation of all dates, months, times in states or provinces of Bigfoot incidences all across North America. And so if I was on my computer and you would ask me, you would tell me, Val, I'm from Kentucky. Can you tell me roughly how many reports there have been for Kentucky? I'd say, sure. I'd give you a list. I'd give you the earliest date. I'd give you the most recent date. And I'd tell you how many reports there have been. That's not to say that this is empirical science, but it's pretty darn good. And that's one of the things that the database does. We'll go back and look at the reference book that I referred to. This has, I don't know, there might be 90 data points to that. And just about any topic you could think of. And if you've been to my group site, you can see some of the stuff that I post up there. And when I post things there, there's a pretty good indication that I know what I'm talking about, because there's a whole history of topics with dates and times that I can pull up from that database with sources. That's what that does. The North American database that I talk about, it's got tens of thousands of reports in it. And this is the biggie. This is the big one. This has over 116 data points. Somebody, a friend of mine on the group site within the past week sent me a position paper, a study that was done. I believe the professor was out of Canada, but he was doing it for BFRO. And I read the study paper, and I thought, well, I had to ask him. I says, is this something I can share with a group? And I don't want to repeat what he said, but he's a pretty good guy. But I'm glad I didn't, because there was a lot of stuff in there that a lot of people wouldn't understand, that's not familiar with databases and stuff. But just to show some of the things that people look at, I mean, serious people, when they're looking at the Bigfoot topic and Bigfoot databases, is demographics. And I mean, demographics. You don't know what demographics is? Look it up. But it goes into a lot of things that you would never associate with a Bigfoot topic. And I was even surprised about the direction that this study went and how deep they went. I don't do that, but what I do look at, I certainly look at the dates and the times, the years, the months, the seasons, the times of days that the incidents occurs, the sizes of Bigfoots that are reported, the colors, the color of eyes. And of course, I always start my database out. When I'm looking at a report, I read a report wherever it's found, and I look for certain key words, key phrases, and I classify them. And I might look at it, I might look at the report quickly, or I might set it aside and revisit it. But I'm looking for 6 primary group settings when I'm looking at reports. I'm looking for those reports that happen during camping, because these are the 6 primary activities that people are involved in when they report Bigfoot sightings. The first is camping. The second is farming. The third is hiking. The fourth is hunting. And then you've got the motorist and residential. These are the main areas, the main primary areas. There's 6 of them in total that you're looking at. And when you talk to people in the Bigfoot community about going out to the woods and going out here and going out there, really consider this. A large portion, very large percentage of Bigfoot reports come from, guess what? You and me driving in cars. That's where the sightings occur. They also occur in large proportions right there at your home. And we can follow that narrative that you're only going to see a Bigfoot out in the Pacific Northwest in some dark forest and stuff. It's not the case when you're looking at these reports and stuff. Now we'll talk about Michigan. Michigan, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I know, we have about roughly about 1,680 reports, 85 reports. That's a lot. Two of the earliest Michigan Bigfoot enthusiasts are Wayne King and Art Kappa. Unfortunately, those are the pioneer of Michigan Bigfoot researchers. Unfortunately, these guys left nothing for future generations. You would like to think that, well, maybe when I die, I'll leave this work that I do to some group so that they use this as a springboard for future generations. They've got something to work with. That's the hope, anyway. And so as far as the Michigan database goes, it's pretty much mirrors with 116 data points, the larger North American database. But being a Michigan resident myself, I'm pretty particular to Michigan. You know, this is my home state. This is where my vested interest is, right here. And so I'm pretty familiar with the counties. But I could tell you this, Michigan has 83 counties, and every county in Michigan has had Bigfoot reports. Every county, 83. I've read something some time ago, some report, or maybe it was on a YouTube show about Upper Peninsula, Michigan. And I thought these people were in error because they claimed that the counties up in Upper Peninsula have more Bigfoot more Bigfoot encounters than anywhere in Michigan. That's not true. That is not true. What county are you guys from?
We're in Wayne, both of us.
Oh, you're in Wayne? You're in Wayne, huh? Okay, cool.
Yeah, we're both.
That's very good. I can tell you that Wayne County has had about 23 reports, and I'm Wayne County also, I might add. But Washtenaw County has had about 60 reports. Jackson and Hillsdale are biggies with reports. That's in southeast Michigan. Oakland County, they've had a few, but not as many as Wayne County. But what's surprising about Wayne County is Wayne County, you got to understand, is the most populous counties besides Oakland County in southeast Michigan. And yet, we're led to believe that you only find Bigfoots out in the Pacific Northwest. You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
And so there was a report in 2007, if I remember correctly, of a Bigfoot in Southwest Detroit. You got to be familiar with Southwest Detroit if you're from Wayne County. That's as urban and inner city as you can get. And so when you hear the experts claim that, out there in the Pacific Northwest, that's where all the Bigfoot sightings are, there's something not right with this information. There has been tons of reports of Bigfoots in inner city, not in Michigan, not only in Michigan, but pretty much across the country. They survive, they move. In fact, let me tell you this, a couple of years ago, I had one unconfirmed report. I couldn't get the witness to contact me. But in the downriver community of Trenton, there was a report of a black Sasquatch juvenile, 6 footish, little over 6 foot, on a railroad track going berserk. So much so that it had the police there blocking the traffic at a railroad crossing. And I only know about this because a commercial truck driver happened to be driving by with the windows down and took note of it. The officers video recording the creature and anybody else that was gawking. And unfortunately, I couldn't get him to give me a firsthand account of that. But that was a report. But we also get reports from the area around Detroit Metro Airport,
Okay.
and as well as New Boston, the state parks, the county parks around there.
Yeah.
So all those areas right there have been good with reports, as well as the neighboring communities in Washtenaw County, as being Ypsilanti and around Ann Arbor, Hill, Michigan, and all those areas. Waterloo Park is where I had my personal encounter.
That's interesting. It's surprising with Metro Detroit, but there are reports that I've read too, outside of your specific group,
Mm-hmm.
that all claim Metro Detroit is I guess an unfamiliar hotspot for a lot of reports coming out of it when you think of how dense in an urban setting it really is.
Well, years ago, let's go down to Monroe County again real quickly. Years ago, in the early 1800s, down there in Frenchtown Township, right off the River Raisin, or Raisin River, as some call it, around the site of the River Raisin massacre, it's pretty well known that during the battle of 1812, that American and British soldiers wrote in their memoirs sightings of Bigfoot all along the Fort Street Trail. You wonder why they call it Fort Street, is because it went from one fort to another fort. And that's the trail that they used. Down near Monroe County, Dixie Highway was also another, which runs into Jefferson, used to be another military trail. And so these soldiers, both British and American, would have these sightings, and they would write about them. And beyond that, even earlier than that, in the late 1600s, there is some reference to these Bigfoots in the memoirs and diaries, biographies of the early French explorers and the missionaries. They seen them too. You know, it's reported that famous French explorer La Salle was attacked by one of them, and he had to use a sword to beat it. You know, because if you can picture downriver today, well, back in the 1800s, downriver didn't look like that. You know, you probably had thick woods and swamp all the way up to the river's edge.
Yeah.
And you can imagine a beast like that coming out of the wood line, attacking somebody. And it's pretty interesting. To me, it's pretty interesting. But there had been sightings in Grosse Ile, in the Grosse Pointe areas, in Detroit, you know, up in Detroit, southwest Detroit. You have Fort Wayne. Well, that fort up there, and the original Fort Detroit, closer to downtown, whereas downtown Detroit is today, there were reports that Bigfoots used to scale the stockade fences and stuff to steal food and, you know, just annoy and pester the soldiers and stuff. So these have been around for a very, very, very long time. There's an early report that came from a French fur trader, but this is pretty old, and I think it was dated in the 1800s, early 1800s, but it came from the area of St. Clair County, Macomb County, that area around Mount Clemens, probably closer to Harson's Island. And what it was, in essence, was some Indian warriors or hunters were making their way across the state, you know, hunting for furs and stuff, and they would sell it or trade it and barter it to French trappers and stuff. And they told a French furrier that they had seen a tribe of Sasquatches. They didn't call them Sasquatches; they called them wild men, and they called them. The French called them the same term that the Australians use for the Aboriginal, but they described them perfectly as Sasquatches and stuff. But there was a large group of them, like a family, like a clan, that they had spotted. These Indians, hunters, had spotted up near the Tittabawassee River, up near the Saginaw Bay City area. And then, as the Indian hunters are making their wide, circuitous travel back around towards Lapeer County, they spotted that group again, which really points to the distance that these things travel. I mean, distance. I mean, from Bay City down to Lapeer County, north of Oakland County, and then finally into St. Clair County. So this group of Sasquatches back in the early 1800s. They entered this little village, and it is written that when they entered this village, well, then the bells started to toll by themselves, which spooked these people because they see that as witchcraft. And they're saying that in this report that this French explorer sent by dispatch back to Paris, France, by boat. You know, there was no telegraph, no pagers, no computers, no telephones. So everything had to go by slow snail mail. And that was on ship across the ocean. But he was going to be the first one that sent this dispatch out to France, Europe, old Europe, where it could make news about this new world here. And so as it goes in that report, he's talking about these things when they come into the village, all the dogs disappear. Whether they're eaten or not, who knows? They just disappear. And then the townspeople of this village are pissed because, you know, hey, you're disrupting our life here. You know, you're scaring us to death. The bells are ringing by themselves. Our dogs are disappearing. All the milk is gone from these cows. Something come in here and suck the milk right out of the udders of these cows, and we're pissed. Not only that, they claim that wherever these beasts roamed, the vegetation died, whether it's corn or green leaves and stuff. It all died. It just left a path of dead vegetation. So this all to them confirmed supernatural. Bigfoot's supernatural. And that's the way they looked at it. So they had enough of it. And they got together, like you would expect, in the early 1800s. They got their pitchforks out, their hoes, whatever other weapons that they had, and they were going to kill him. And they chased him across the lake, the channel there at Harson's Island, and that's where they made their escape. They said that when they got the boats together to go across the waterway to finally deal the death blow, they couldn't find him anywhere. So it's always been surmised that the Bigfoot's found in underground passage through the water, or, you know, who knows, on the island, I don't know. And then they pop up someplace else, you know, up in Saginaw, you know, days later or a day later or something. So it's all pretty interesting. And I've always said that when you start looking at Bigfootery, it's chock full of puzzle and mystery, the whole thing. But it's extremely interesting when you look at it. And that's some of the early Michigan history. And so I'll go back and revisit the 1600s and tell you there was, I believe it was the Ottawa Indian, very early in Michigan's history. There were three major Native American groups. I mean, there was a lot of different Native American tribes and people, but the major groups were the Ottawa, the Ojibwa, and the Potawatomi. Those were the three major groups here in this state. And just so you know, the Ojibwa are the Cherokee, or the Chippewa rather. And that was the French interpretation of Chippewa. Very big, very huge. And of course you had the Huron. But there was, I have a news article, early news article, that says that back in the 1600, middle 1600s or so, the Ottawa first became familiar with Sasquatches in Michigan, and they called them red hairy men, and that they smelled badly. And some people, when they read this, they interpret that to be Vikings, that they seen Vikings, because we associate Vikings with red hair and stink and everything else. But, the thing about Bigfootery is that we have to guard ourselves from using our interpretations of the world as we know it to fit what we see and what is told us, from old writings and stuff. Does that make sense?
It does to me. Yeah, it's very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. So that's very early Michigan history right there. And so in July, the Lost Cryptids Conservatory are going to have a Michigan Bigfoot conference in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And it's kind of interesting that it's going to be in Washtenaw County, because Washtenaw County is probably, that county has about 60 Bigfoot reports. I mean, if you're going to have a conference, you're going to have it where you make the news. And that place has had a lot of history. Is there anything that you guys want to ask?
I have about a page full here of questions. I've just been, it's been an honor listening to you sharing stories. So I apologize for not talking as much as we normally do on this.
Yeah, a lot of what you talked about was really mind opening. Like, just in any sense, like if people didn't believe, like hearing these stories are like, wow, a possibility that something like this existed at one point. It could just blow people's minds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna agree. It's eye opening. I am definitely the quote unquote Bigfoot guy in our group. It's a topic I've been involved with since I was a young child, and still probably more today than ever. So,
have you had an encounter, either one of you guys?
What's funny is Jeremy. Oh, I can answer for him because I know he has not. I truly,
Thank you, Jake.
I truly believe that I have, and I've never shared that with Jeremy or Jesse, or truthfully, really anybody for that matter. But I'm pretty convinced that I had something very unusual happen.
Where did this happen at, Jake?
This would be Montmorency County, so northern Lower Peninsula.
Sure.
I know I believe I reached out to you a couple months back. It was probably in November, December of this past year. With the three of us actually took a trip. We're kind of working on a new web series where we're going to highlight where we go in and we investigate urban legends. And the big one, of course, is going to be Sasquatch throughout the state. So we were up there filming, and, we had some potential I call them Class B sightings, vocalizations, whether that was wood knocks. And there was one howl that we potentially heard that did not sound canine. It sounded much larger and much deeper.
Mm-hmm.
My visual sighting that I still struggle with today to say exactly what it was back in 2010. Same county, a little different of an area, but it was right outside the city of Atlanta. I have family that live there. They've lived there for the past 25 years. We spend the summers up there and vacation with them weeks at a time. So what I saw coming back one day, I was walking down to the boat launch, which is approximately quarter mile to a half mile walk from my grandparents' house. And I was coming back, and it was getting to dusk. And I remember hitting this one point where the roads crossed. Basically, it dead ends this road. I would have had to take a left to go back to the house. And I turned that corner to head left. I could hear something off to my left into the thicker part of the woods making some noise. And deer are very high populated up there. There's a population of black bear up there. So in my head, the first thing I thought was it's got to be a deer. Worst case, it's a bear. So I keep walking. I start looking into the woods and seeing what I can see, and I don't see anything. But the noise just keeps getting louder and louder. So finally, notice in the distance, 30, 40 yards away, probably, I see this black figure down what I would assume is on all fours. Instantly, I thought, well, that's a bear. Not good. I'm not out here with any type of protection. I just took a walk. Even though, they're in the area, I'm familiar with the area. I'm just out for a stroll. So I start moving a little faster, and I keep my eyes on it the whole time. And it wasn't until it stood up that it really caught my eye and caught my attention. Wherever it was stood up, I had to assume it was about the same height as me. And at that time, I've already reached 6'1", somewhere around that range.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at this silhouette of this dark black figure that's standing there, and it doesn't look like a bear when it stands up. The reason I say it doesn't look like a bear is you have the shape of the head, which was very large, and then you had where the neck would start, but then you had very big traps. Almost, it looked similar to a bodybuilder.
Mm-hmm.
The neck wasn't very defined at all. There was big traps, and I went into these very broad shoulders of where the shoulder blades would be. But the arms, typically on a bear that I've seen as far as pictures, they're either out in front or they're down a little more towards their stomach. These arms were hanging side by side
Mm-hmm.
of whatever this thing was. They were very long. They went past what I would assume would have been the waistline. Again, like I said, at this point, I'm looking at this dark figure. I can't really see any details, but I could see where the left arm of whatever it was kind of swinging back and forth. So I could tell at that point, I was like, well, in my head, I'm like, that can't be a bear. That's got to be somebody's playing a joke on me.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point in my life, I've been a little bit interested in Bigfoot. I heard about it as a young child. I got really into it around the age 10 and 11. We put this I would have been 14. So I was kind of fading out of it. But the whole time I'm watching this thing just kind of stand there, and then it takes a couple steps, and it looked so human-like that in my head, I'm like, well, this is some kind of cruel joke, and I don't know who would be walking around out here. In that portion of that forest is all state land.
Mm-hmm.
There are no houses around. I'm like, who's going to be walking out here pulling a prank on somebody?
Mm-hmm.
Took about 5 steps, maybe 4 or 5 steps, and then it dropped back down to the ground, and I could still see where the back was.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched it stroll away. The only other part that still sticks with me today is when it walked away, its back stayed very flat and was very horizontal. There was no bouncing, and there was no side-to-side movement that you would see with a bear, or even if it was a human. It was very flat, very narrow, and it just strolled away. And at that point, I turned around and didn't look at it anymore, and I started running. And I ran back to the house. Like I said, I've shared this story with one person before, and that was my grandfather, who he is a believer in the subject. He has never seen a visual sighting. He thinks he's had vocal encounters. And that's the area he's lived in, like I said, for the last 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
But again, he's never had a visual sighting. So if that's what I saw, in my head, I have to assume it was either a bear, a person, or a Sasquatch, which I didn't truly know if they were ever out there. And at that point, that's when my interest really started to peak, and it hasn't come down on the downtrend yet. It's still at the peak point. So it's the last 11 years now.
Well, that's pretty interesting. You say Montmorency, and that's up there that's up in the area. Not real close, but it's in the area of Menominee.
Mm-hmm.
In that area. All those areas right there that you mentioned, Jay, those are areas where the large mounds have been found too. There's an old article that I have seen, and I probably have someplace, that depicts that area as being sacred. And you'll notice when the deeper you get into this, and the more you study and the more you read, the more you know, you'll notice that there's some uncanny correlation between Sasquatch reports and old Indian burial grounds and stuff. There's almost an undeniable connection there, whether it's for whatever reason. Use your imagination.
Yeah.
But in that area, I know that there have been large Indian mounds. Now, I never knew, and I still don't. I'm still not real sure what to make of the Indian mounds. I think I've got an idea now. You've heard of the early Indian mounds, correct?
I have, yep.
How about you, Jeremy? Have you heard that? Indian
No,
mounds?
I've not.
Okay. The early Indian mounds, a lot of them are gone now, but in the early century, 18th century, 19th century, a lot of the settlers that started settling in these areas, especially in Ohio, because Ohio is a lot of flat land, they'd clear their land out for agricultural purposes, and they would have these mounds, these terrific mounds in the middle of their land. Well, you can't plow these grounds with large hills and stuff in the middle of your property. So they'd destroy them. They'd start digging them out, excavate them, and lo and behold, they would find humongous skeletal remains of beasts. I'm talking 9 foot. I'm talking about 11 foot. I'm talking about 14 feet. Some of them as large as 16 feet skeletal remains. I don't know what I don't know if they're humans or what, but that's a fact. That's not exaggeration. A lot of these things end up in Smithsonian, and then they just disappear in the abyss from that point. But as far as Michigan goes, I do know of a case that occurred in the early 1900s down in Jackson, Michigan, where it was reported that a police officer who owned a home down there in Jackson County was digging in his backyard for a garden or something and dug up the remains of a 9-foot tall skeleton with black hair. With black hair. And there's no further information on whatever happened to it. But that's a fact. That is a fact. So these things have been around a long time in Michigan. And it seems to me that I recall early reports, I'm talking about 1950s, 1940s reports, even earlier, maybe 1920s, reports of Bigfoots up in Otsego, just tearing up the place, just scaring the good folk up there,
Yeah.
to the point where the police are trying to restore calm, and you got the natives all upset. You've got unbelievable antics going on, and it's pretty fascinating. Some of the stuff that I see is pretty fascinating when you start looking at this stuff. But
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, and it seems that you have a ton of knowledge, which is appreciated, and I appreciate you sharing it with us. I know one point you talked about how far these things can move, especially if they're in family groups. And I think it was posted to the page. I believe it was your page not too long ago. What is your idea on the possibility of migration with these animals?
well, I am a proponent of the migration theory, and you will too if you stop and consider it.
Mm-hmm.
If you agree that there are Bigfoot Sasquatch in Michigan, how do you, pray tell me that they got here? I mean, do they fall from the sky? Do they grow from the ground? How did they get here?
Yeah, they would definitely have to come from somewhere.
So that is the answer that you will use when people test you on the theory of migration. How did they get here?
Right.
I mean, really, using logic and reason, there's only one possible way. They came from one place and got here from another. How they got here and the route that they took remains a mystery. I believe, and it's always been my working theory, as far as Michigan is concerned, if you look at the geography of Michigan, if you look at the map, I have to believe that a good number of Sasquatches head north, say from Illinois and Indiana. Indiana's an big agricultural state and largely rural up to the state lines of Michigan, as well as Ohio. So I believe that these things travel routes that their ancestry has traveled for generations. And it's a pretty well known idea that these things return to places they're most familiar with. You've heard the cliche, people or this thing is, we're all creatures of habit. Really, this to the umpteenth degree, that's true with Sasquatch. There's a couple different types of Sasquatch, I believe, and that is the nomadic Sasquatch, the one that moves like a Bedouin at night, that packs up and doesn't call any certain place their home. They're just moving for food, for survival. And then there's residents. There's the Sasquatch in areas that have been there for generations, and they've been there because they find that they find security, and they find that to be safe, and that's where they decide to raise their kids. Excuse me, I got the hiccups.
Oh, no problem.
And that's where they raise their kids. So that's the term resident, and they know because they've been there for so long. They know where the resources are. They know where the water is. They know where the food is. And again, as human beings, as people, we don't want to get stuck into that notion in our mind, my mind, your mind, Jeremy's mind, that Sasquatch can't survive because it doesn't fit our idea. I mean, we've got McDonald's, we've got a restaurant here, we got a restaurant there. How are they gonna survive? I couldn't. You know, you look at yourself, you think to yourself, I couldn't survive out there. But you're not them. They're very, very adaptive, you know, to the environment. These things have been reported in Oakland County, up in the plush communities, the new communities of Auburn Hills, and up in that area, eating out of the trash behind the nice restaurants. I'm not talking about a Carter hamburger. I'm talking about good restaurants. You know, where they got good trash. You know, ribs and stuff. They're out there smacking their lips on some rib bones and stuff that they find, you know, in that corral behind the restaurant. And you scare the daylights out of the busboy that's throwing away the trash. You know, he wants to get through with the shift. And then he's got to look at that, you know, rooting around in the trash in the back there. And so they've been seen around McDonald's. They've been seen eating whatever people throw, you know, their hamburgers, cheeseburgers, old French fries. You know, they'll eat that too. And they seem to like it. And so all around the metro area, guys, Jeremy and Jake, there are huge regional refuse dump areas. Well, guess what? They know where they're at too. They know where these places are too, and they'll eat there if they have to. There's been an old report in Michigan. When I say old, I'm talking about maybe early 1990s. I distinctly recall a report of a Bigfoot in a suburb area in the middle of summer, but it's in the backyard drinking out of someone's backyard pool, just gulping the water down. You know, and then you've got reports of, and again, this is in Michigan. You got reports of a family of Sasquatches spotted in someone's backyard, and they're playing on the swing set. The babies are playing on the swing set with a huge mama standing guard, standing watch. Sasquatches have no idea of possession, of ownership. They know no ownership, and that has been stated by many Native Americans time and time again that know the topic. There's no bearing to them. They have no sense of ownership. And one of the reasons why I just posted something tonight, you can go look it out as soon as you're done with this program, if you care to. I posted a post on there about Bigfoot's urinating on tents, marking the territory like animals do. Lions do it, dogs do it. A lot of animals do it. They mark the territory.
Mm.
And Bigfoots have this nasty habit of peeing on tents, peeing on campers. And if you've ever smelled a Sasquatch, you know that's some bad smells there, bad smells. But the guys are saying, the witnesses are saying, hey, I'm out here minding my business, camping. We want to go fishing, and we got this Sasquatch peeing on our tent. It sounds like a bull watering this tent down and stuff. And they say that a lot of people report this.
Mm-hmm.
My gosh, lots of people. And what this is it has to be Sasquatch marking their territory. They're telling you, this is mine. Your tent is mine. There's been tons of reports of Sasquatch going out there and knocking tents down on people. They mark the tents with urine, and if you don't get the message, then knock the tent down. This is mine here. And there's also been reports. A lot of people go out and say, well, we're going to go out and look for Bigfoot and stuff. You'd never see or you never hear of anybody going out there and saying, oh yeah, well, I found some stick formations. I found a track. I'm pretty certain it's Sasquatch. So I want to go over there and mark the territory. I want to pee on the stick formation. Well, in my mind, you do that. That's the ultimate insult. And there's been reports of witnesses, hunters and hikers alike, that say, we watched Bigfoot, Sasquatch go over there, sniff the tree that I peed on, and then turned around and peed over it. And so it has to be the idea of them urinating on things to do with people have to be a matter of exerting dominance, like an alpha male.
Yeah, I would have to agree.
I don't think it's a wise idea to go out there and pee on a stick formation that you're pretty certain isn't natural caused, because it's stupidity. You're looking for provocation, and it's, to me, guys, it's just unnecessary. You don't want to do that.
Right.
You don't want to do that. On the same hand, there are a good number of reports that talk about women, and it's been said by some pretty good um, Bigfoot figures in the community that I respect and I trust, that that come right out and tell women, if it's that time of the month, don't go out there. Do not go out there. If you do, be with somebody. Don't go out there alone and stuff. There are some people that call themselves Bigfoot researchers that will use used personal hygiene products as a way of baiting a Sasquatch encounter. That kind of stuff, guys, I don't go with. I don't bait, and I don't habituate myself. I don't gift. Call it whenever you want. I don't do that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
I never have done that. Maybe sometime I will, but I generally don't. But there's a lot of that stuff. There's a lot of behavioral things that you can learn uh, involving Bigfoot, Sasquatches that you don't normally think about and stuff. But that's the kind of stuff that you gain when you research and analyze a lot of these reports and stuff. There's so much to learn.
I know you mentioned you had your experience, which I mean you told us it was in Washington, or Jackson County, the Waterloo area.
Yeah.
Have you gone out? Do you do any active investigations, hoping you'll have another one, or are you more just focused on the research of reports?
Well, thank you for asking that, Jake. I, I don't consider myself a Bigfoot researcher, because I have this stereotypical thing about me that when I think of Bigfoot researchers, I think of somebody cloaked in a white smock, you know, with a magnifying glass. Look at this, with a magnifying glass, and you just don't see that. And really, my biggest issue with the Bigfoot community is educating people, and with tongue in cheek, I challenge people to learn how to write a report first before they call themselves a Bigfoot researcher. You can go out there, you can learn. You can give a monkey enough peanuts and bananas, and they'll go out there and scream for you if you show them how to do it. But you got to teach people how to write a report and how to report what they see, and teach them the different types of evidence. There's a lot of people that don't understand the difference between proof and evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see that quite often when you see some of these group sites, and you get the experts from the table there, from the kitchen counter. They'll tell you that's a hoax. Well, how do you know it's a hoax? Well, I don't know. It just looks like a hoax. Well, you got to prove it first. And to me, there's a lot of stuff that people don't consider before they jump into this stuff. But I don't consider myself a Bigfoot researcher. I consider myself a data miner, a Bigfoot profiler. That's probably a closer term that best fits me, because I do go out, but I tell you this, and my friends know this as well. This boy here isn't going to go out there and sleep on the cold damn ground anymore. I did that in the military. I just don't do that. I mean, if you want to go out and do that, I'll give you my blessings, and I'll go out there, and I do like going out there, and I do like hiking, and I do like the camaraderie that we share when we go out and stuff. But as far as spending extended periods of times and stuff, look, guys, I did that in the military a lot, and I just prefer a bed more than I do a cold, damp ground and stuff. That's just the way I look at it. I serve the Bigfoot community better doing what I'm doing. And yeah, I'll pick and choose when I go out. In fact, I went out with the guys. They needed to check something out. They needed to take some reports out in Ionia, and I was happy to go out there with them and put my interview skills to good use, to get the information and stuff. We got some good reports out there, and while we stopped at a gas station to get ourselves refreshed and stuff, some gentleman, I guess he was a truck driver, happened to see that mask that I was wearing, that diaper that you have to wear on your face.
Mm-hmm.
It's got a Sasquatch emblem on it. And he says, "Is that a Sasquatch?" And the guy stood right there and gave me a beautiful report out of Flint, Michigan.
Oh, okay.
Out of the Genesee County area, right there. That's all it took. All he had to do was see that insignia. But that's a great thing about Bigfootery. There's people out there. There's more people out there than you can imagine that are willing to discuss that, and you really don't have to solicit a lot from people. And it's pretty good. But do you want to hear my encounter?
Oh, I would love to if you feel free to share. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any problems with that. This occurred on July 19th, 2014. Myself and Bob Daigle were out in Waterloo Park, just the two of us. Very, very hot, extremely hot. Mosquitoes were tearing us up out there. Mosquitoes and flies. And I think we went through one of those dispensers of off, and we had stopped in the town to grab some lunch and to buy another can of that off spray. And when I'm hungry, I'm bitching. And I don't bitch much, but I'm bitching. When I'm telling Bob, I said, you open your mouth and you got flies in your mouth, mosquitoes in your mouth. They're biting you all over the place. They're eating this off, and it doesn't seem to help. But we're out there, and it's getting pretty late in the day. We've been out there for quite a few hours, and we decide to walk across two agricultural fields, and we head for a wood line that we had been into before. And we get into the woods, the thick woods and stuff. And this is, like I said, this is in July, so everything is green, extremely hot, very humid, very miserable. And one of the first things that Bob and I noticed I remember Bob stopping and he says, "Do you hear that?" And I says, "Yeah." I says, "What is that?" "It sounds like acorns to me, flittering through the leaves." And I thought he said it was acorns and stuff. And that's what it sounded like to me. They just seemed to be dropping all over the place. And we walked a little further, very thick, and all of a sudden there was a loud, sharp crack. It was so loud it sounded like a gunshot. I mean, very loud. It wasn't a twig and it wasn't a stick, but it was a very thick branch crack, loud. And we both paused, and we were mouthing the words, "What was that? Did you hear that?" "Yeah, I heard that." Okay. So we continued pushing further, and a short distance ahead, we came to a large fallen tree. Now, I don't know that tree fell, before we got there. I don't know. It could have, but I felt that maybe it had been felled, a month before or whatever. I don't know, but it was pretty big tree. And I do remember that. And then on the opposite side, on the other side of that big tree, was a large, I would call it a Bigfoot nest, BF nest, large gathering of bramble bushes and stuff. But the thing about this was that it was almost molded and fashioned to be a large 7 or 8 foot cocoon, hollow in the center that you could enter. Very dark, and it was very deep. There's a video on YouTube of some explorers, some Bigfoot researchers with young kids and stuff. They're checking out a Bigfoot nest, and the individual's on his hands and knees, and he's peering inside the nest itself, and that's what Bob Daigle was doing. It was very big. I mean, I was going to crawl in there. Again, this is the guy that's bitching about the bugs and stuff, the infestation. And it was very hot. And no, I wasn't going to do that. I was standing on the opposite side of that tree, looking around, looking up above me, and kind of keeping watch. But behind me, and I got the pictures posted on my group site. Behind me, there's a large, probably 6'6", probably 6'6", 3-poled teepee standing up in the background from where we're at. And to my left, I see 2 or 3 sapling trees that are arched over, perfectly bowed. So there's a couple things going on. There was a couple dynamics going on here with this encounter. There was the intermittent acorns thrown at us, and then there was a large tree branch that cracked, and then we find the tree down, and then we find a Bigfoot nest, and then we see the teepee, perfect teepee structure. So I'm standing there, and Bob is on his hands and knees looking inside, trying to see if there's anything in there. And what I did was I felt, if you ever go into a busy theater or restaurant, try this sometime as an experiment. You go into a busy theater or a restaurant, just have a seat, sit down, and pick somebody out. You'll hear all the noise, all the white noise going on around you. Sit down, watch the activity, pick one person out of that busy room and stare at them and see what happens. Do that as an experiment and see what happens. You know what happens?
I don't even have a guess.
The person that you're staring at will scratch their face. You'll see them shrug their shoulders, or you may see them turn right around and stare at you right in your eyes, look at you. And so I'm standing there, and I feel as though somebody is staring at me. I get that feeling. And so what I did was I had that little cheap Kodak camera with me, and I swung it around in a 180-degree arc and started snapping pictures. I didn't telegraph myself. I didn't look around over my shoulder and then make a gesture as though I'm getting ready to take some pictures. I just did it. And this thing, this being, probably 8.5 feet tall, is probably 13 feet off the ground on the side of behind a tree. I don't know if it's climbing up a tree or coming down a tree, but it's standing there staring at me. It's there staring at me. And my first reaction is what the F? And I'm going to tell you something, guys. If the longer you know me, you know I don't use very often. I don't use profanities and obscenities. I'm not that type of person. I don't like it. Mm-hmm. I mean, impress me with your mastery over the English language, but don't do that. And so my first impression is, what the F? I mean, are you kidding me already? I mean, I'm looking at this thing. My first thought is, again, I harken back to the Indian. You remember the Indian I told you about? I'm
Yep.
looking at this thing. I don't know what it is, how it got here, but it's there. And so I'm looking at this thing. I'm saying to myself, what the F? Are you kidding me already? You freak, you, I'm calling it. You freak. And there's no smirk. I mean, I had to think in my mind that somebody is out there in the woods dressed up like this on that very hot day to pull a prank. And so my response, what the F? Are you kidding me already? And then I called him a freak, thinking, if this is a man, he's gonna find some humor in that, and he's gonna crack a smile. But this thing didn't crack a smile. It just stood there dumbfounded and stuff. It's just staring at me, no emotion. And then I experienced some type of feelings as though, and I hearkened back again to that Indian apparition that I seen, as though this thing was peering into my soul. And I started thinking thoughts, and I started feeling myself feeling as though I was thinking rapidly, as fast as a computer, because, and guys, you got to understand, I'm a stone cold sober man. There's no hitting the bottle here for me. Stone cold sober at 12 o'clock midnight. And I'm telling you that whatever it did, and I have to believe that was what people experience as infrasound, I could see how that would put somebody to sleep. I could see how they could capture and devour deer by putting them to sleep through that infrasound, because I really felt that my life was in danger if I allowed it to overcome me. And it was only by the choice of fate that we have to be command and control over our own destination, that I got up with the force of willpower to get up and leave. And I told Bob, I says, Bob, we got to go. And he says, what's wrong? I said, Bob, we got to go. Well, I'm checking out this. I said, Bob, if you don't leave, I'm going to leave you here. I got to go. I mean, this is not normal. Whatever that thing was, it was not normal. There's nobody walking around 8.5 feet tall out there in the woods in the summer dressed like that. And, you just don't have those kind of feelings and those thoughts in your head. And you read stories about people talking about, well, there's love and peace and where's the sunshine and stuff. I didn't hear that kind of stuff, but I didn't feel that kind of stuff. What I felt was 100% pure, unadulterated hatred. And I never did anything to these beasts. I don't even hunt anymore. And I was carrying my gun. I always carry my gun. And it had to see it because I was on my right side. And it was on my right side looking at me, and it had to see my gun there because that's where I carried my weapon. And so I look at it like this. Obviously, it didn't come down the tree. If it had come down the tree, I would have had a heart attack right there. And I really honestly believe there was a second one up in the tree, a blonde one, up in a tree, higher next to that tree. And finally, when Bob and I fled, I mean, listen, guys, I seen death. I seen a lot of death. I was out there at Metro Airport when that plane crashed. Mm. And I'm going to tell you something. When we come out of that, we broke that wood line, that tree line where we were at. We looked down and we seen a track right there in that field that heads into that wood line. 17 and a half inches. We paused long enough to measure and take a picture of it. No casting. And then we had to go. I mean, I was dead serious. Bob, we have to go. There's no joking. There's no talking. And I'm telling you, if that thing would have came out of that wood line on all fours, I probably dropped dead right there with a heart attack. I ain't gonna have that stuff. Bob dropped me off. We got in this ride. He dropped me off at the McDonald's where I parked my vehicle. I said goodbye to him. I didn't want to talk to any more about anything. I was still in shock from what I seen. As soon as he left, I went into the McDonald's restaurant and I had to order myself a cheeseburger. Of all things, it's about a 50-mile drive back home by myself. And I often wondered why a cheeseburger. Of all things, why did I order that? I don't eat cheeseburger like that. And then I come to learn later that there's a dairy product. There's a product in that dairy that acts similar to it has a calming effect on people the way milk has calming effect on babies. When a baby cries and stuff,
Right.
they get milk and it calms them down. So it was almost a year before I ever went back out there again, because I'm gonna tell you something, buddy. I wasn't ready to see another one like that. It had a profound effect on me, and for those that say they don't exist, they would change their mind when they see something like that. And I know for a fact, just being a gatekeeper of a lot of reports, there's a lot of people that live around Grass Lake and Waterloo Park, Jackson County, Washtenaw County, excuse me, that used to listen to Bigfoot or listen to police scanners. And a lot of the good reports came from these people. And these people would report overhearing DNR and Washtenaw County Sheriff and Ingham County Sheriff talking on the radios about Bigfoot sightings. And there's one in particular that I remember of DNR out there talking about over the police scanner, talking about seeing a gray one out there that so-and-so seen while they were on that poaching, anti-poaching operation. Oh yeah, she's seen it out there. Was it the gray one? No, yeah, it was a gray one. But somebody called and reported seeing a Sasquatch crossing a trail with a deer over its shoulder. Oh yeah, okay, I didn't hear that one. Yeah. And then so-and-so called from the sheriff's department. They want us to go out and check out his property, his farm. He's walking his property line, and he's all upset because something had ripped the head off of his prized 8-point buck or something that he was saving for hunting season. And now the head is off of it. He's very upset, and the deer is up in the tree. Oh yeah, and another farmer out here is complaining because he's got 3 or 4 deer dead cached in his tree. He's upset. So a lot of good reports came from people, just citizens, monitoring the police scanners and stuff. It's very interesting stuff.
Yeah, for sure. It's I appreciate you sharing your experience, your story. It was very eye opening, especially to hear someone like you and all these people come forward with their stories. Even to the people that don't believe, you gotta at some point think that there's something out there. They can't all be hoaxes, but yours is just the feeling that you got. I'm sure it was hard to deal with at the time. So thank you very much for sharing that. We appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. You're welcome. And before we leave, Jake, can I just plug my book?
Oh yeah, for sure. Please.
We got a book coming out. It's going to be right now, as far as I'm concerned, it's going to be 2 volumes, and it might be more. I'm told it's going to be pretty big as far as the size, the volume of the book and stuff. And I don't know if we can get it all into a second volume, but that's supposed to be out sometime this year. And what I'm trying to do is to get these reports out to people. People can see them, they can read them. A book like this, they can take out camping with them. They can read it, and believe it or not believe it, it's there. So if anybody else has any Bigfoot reports, they can contact me, and they can get a hold of me on the Facebook group site or by email, whichever they choose.
Yeah, that's great. I'm looking forward to that to the book. I know that there was something mentioned that I saw on the group site. It was pretty exciting to see that. Jeremy, before we depart here, do you have any questions for Val or any comments?
No, I mean it's been great having you on and like just learning about all your experiences and your everyday life back when you were in law enforcement and learning about everything else. It's just been, like I said earlier, just eye-opening and mind-blowing.
It's been a pleasure being on, guys. It's been a real pleasure, and I would love to come back again.
Yeah, we can definitely arrange that for sure. Thank you again for coming on. As fellow law enforcement myself, thank you for all your years of service in that and the military. And thanks again for sharing all your knowledge and experience. We greatly appreciate it, and we do look to have you on in the future.
All right, thank you, Jake. Good night now.
All right, thanks, Val.
Have a good night, sir.
Bye now.
All right, Jeremy, do you have any closing comments on that great interview we just had with Val?
No, I mean, like I said to him, like everything that he said tonight is just from like his past experience, like I said, with law enforcement all the way up to current events. It's just, like I said, it's just mind blowing just knowing people have these stories, and like your story like was even mind blowing to me too. So yeah. I mean, it's fucking crazy.
Sorry for withholding that all the years we've known each
Yeah,
other,
all right.
especially with the project we're working on. It's not an easy thing to talk about because truly, I mean, if you ask me right now, hey, do you think you saw a Bigfoot? I don't know. I really don't know.
Right.
It could have been, like I said, somebody running around. It was November, so it wasn't like it was like in Val's situation. It was dead of summer. It's going to be hot to run around in a costume.
Yeah.
No matter how you're built. You could be an Olympic athlete. You're going to be sweating your ass off if you're running around trying to scare somebody. And really, I started thinking about it. How many people are really doing that? I mean, there are instances of it, but is that every instance is a hoax or misidentification? In my mind, and I know I've told you and I've told Jesse before too, and I've told a lot of people that I believe there is something out there. What it is yet to really be identified and discovered, but hopefully one day.
Yeah, I mean, hey, you never know, man. It could be today, it could be tomorrow.
Times are crazy. If anybody discovers it, I gotta hope it's us with the project going on. But
wouldn't that be some shit?
Yeah, right. So thank you guys for listening. If you are in Michigan and you have any interest in Bigfoot at all, you can find Val's Facebook group, his page. I am a member, and it's pretty cool how much data he has, how much information's on there, and how many people really do share their stories, their opinions, their photos. You can go on Facebook. It is Michigan Bigfoot Report and Data, Gumshoguy's Corner, Gumshoguy. That is, again, Val's group that, has a couple thousand people from the Michigan area, of course, and also nationwide, to be honest. But that's going to do it for us this week at Table Talk. Make sure to comment below in this YouTube video, if you're on YouTube, for any topics that you might want to hear. If you have any comments to share, catch us again on Spotify, Anchor FM, Apple Podcasts, I believe Google Podcasts as well. And if you have any topics you want to hear us talk about, feel free to email us, tabletalkjj@gmail.com. For Jeremy, for Jesse, who unfortunately is not here this week, my name is Jake. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys next time.